Welcome to another deep dive. You know, some books, they don't just tell a story, do they? They become almost prophetic, like a lens for understanding the world even years later.
It's true. Some stories really do become more than just stories. They end up being, well, essential tools for grappling with complex ideas. They just resonate.
Absolutely. And today we're taking a deep dive into one of the most powerful, um, really chilling examples, George Orwell's 1984.
A heavy hitter, for sure.
Definitely. Our mission here is to sort of pull out the most important insights from the novel itself, and we're also looking at that critical introduction by Thomas Pynchon.
Yeah, Pynchon adds a really interesting layer. So we'll explore the foundations of this dystopian society, unpack those psychological tricks the party used for control.
Right. And look at what Orwell might have been warning us about. You know, what he maybe got right, but also, as Pynchon points out, maybe some things he didn't quite see coming.
Exactly. It's not just about prediction, is it?
No, it's more nuanced. Think of this as, well, your shortcut to being really well informed about a book that shapes so many conversations. About truth, power, freedom, all big stuff.
And for our sources today, we're drawing directly from pretty extensive excerpts of 1984 itself, plus that Pynchon introduction you mentioned.
Great. So let's start with the person behind it all. George Orwell. Or, well, Arthur Blair, actually. Born in India in 1903.
Moved to England pretty young, though. Went to Eton, even.
Right. But it was his time in Burma with the Indian Imperial Police that apparently inspired his first novel. That period, 1922 to 27.
Yeah, you can see how that kind of experience would fundamentally shape his perspective right from the start. It set the stage.
Definitely. And he gained this reputation. Paul Gray, in time, called him the finest English essayist of his century. Quite a statement.
And Gray noted he made it his business to tell the truth at a time when many contemporaries believed that history had ordained the lie. That really captures his core, I think.
It does. And of course, Animal Farm in 45 and 1984 and 49, those are what brought him worldwide fame, made that indelible mark, as Desmond McCarthy put it.
You really see that commitment to truth-telling just growing stronger through his work.
It's fascinating how much his own life seems woven into 1984. Pynchon talks about Orwell's politics being not only of the left, but to the left of left.
Which is quite something.
And then his experience in Spain fighting Franco's fascists in 37. Pynchon says he quickly learned the difference between real and phony anti-fascism. How directly does that feed into the warnings in the book?
Oh, hugely. That Spanish experience was, well, absolutely transformative. Orwell himself said it, didn't he? Around 1946, he wrote.
About everything after 36.
Yeah, exactly. Every line of serious work that I've written since 1936 has been written directly or indirectly against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism as I know it. He saw his writing as a weapon, basically.
And this ties into what Pynchon explores, right?
Mm-hmm.
Orwell's despair over the post-war state of socialism. What was driving that disillusionment?
Well, he felt it had become corrupted. What started as an honorable struggle against capitalism, he saw turning into something shamefully institutional, bought and sold, just about power.
And the darker sides overseas.
Right, the Stalinist gulags and the Nazi death camps. He saw a connection.
So it wasn't just theory. He was reacting to a betrayal of ideals he'd held.
Precisely. And Pynchon notes Orwell was particularly bothered by the English left's widespread allegiance to Stalinism, even with all the evidence of its evil nature.
He saw a kind of mental gymnastics going on.
Yeah, he called it a schizophrenic manner of thinking, where words like democracy could mean two opposite things at once, and terrible things like concentration camps could be seen as both right and wrong simultaneously.
Which sounds disturbingly like doublethink.
Exactly. He wrote about that in 48 while revising the draft of 1984. And Pynchon talks about Orwell's anger being precious to him, forged by all this. He was afraid of losing it, of being bought off.
Which mirrors the party's ability to just absorb dissent in the novel.
Absolutely. It shows just how deeply personal this book was. It wasn't just an intellectual exercise.
This really makes you think, doesn't it? How someone's intense personal experiences, their political convictions, can fuel such a powerful, enduring warning like 1984. It feels grounded in something real.
Absolutely. It gives it that visceral quality.
So that's the mind behind it. What about the world he built? Oceania. Let's step inside. It starts with London, doesn't it? Renamed Airstrip 1.
Yeah, and the description is just bleak. A grimy landscape, rotting 19th century houses, walls sagging, windows patched with cardboard. It sets the tone immediately.
Pure decay. And Winston Smith's own living conditions are no better, are they?
Not at all. Victory mansions, Quite the ironic name. It's an old building falling to pieces, flaking plaster, burst pipes in winter, heating that never works right, just constant grinding misery.
But even in this decay, there's that strict hierarchy. Party members in blue overalls.
Right. And even the inner party members who are at the top live what Orwell calls an austere, laborious kind of life compared to, say, pre-war standards.
But they still have the perks.
Oh, yeah. Relatively speaking. Larger flats, better clothes, food, drink, tobacco, servants, even private transport. A clear step up from outer party members.
Who are in turn better off than the submerged masses, the proles. So yeah, even in misery, there are levels.
But the thing that really defines life there is the surveillance, isn't it? The telescreen.
That oblong metal plaque like a dulled mirror. Always on.
Always watching and listening. It could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. Sensitive enough to pick up a heartbeat, apparently.
Terrifying. And the idea that even a bat can be revealing.
Yeah.
You're never, ever safe. No privacy at all.
And then the children. That's maybe the most insidious part.
Turning kids into spies against their parents.
Exactly. Systematically turned into ungovernable little savages through groups like the spies. They adored the party and turned all that childhood energy outwards against the enemies of the state.
So it became almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children, hearing about child heroes who denounce their parents.
It's a chilling way to break down the most fundamental trust. The family unit itself becomes an arm of the state.
And complementing this surveillance are the ministries, with their deliberately misleading names.
Right. The Ministry of Peace runs the wars. The Ministry of Truth creates the lies.
Ministry of Love handles the torture. And Ministry of Plenty oversees starvation.
It's not just hypocrisy, Orwell stresses. These contradictions are deliberate exercises in doublethink. It's meant to mess with your head.
It really makes you pause. Imagine living like that, day in, day out, constant scrutiny. What does that do to your sense of yourself, your relationships? Who could you possibly trust?
It's a world engineered to isolate and control. Utterly.
So that's the oppressive setting. But how did the party achieve such total control? What were the psychological tools?
Well, this gets us right to the core mechanisms. You've got doublethink, the control of memory, the mutability of the past, and, of course, Newspeak.
Let's start with doublethink. It's more than just believing lies, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It's actively reshaping your own mind to fit whatever the party says right now, even if it totally contradicts what you thought 5 minutes ago. Orwell's definition is key. The power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them.
It's like mental surrender, complete cognitive submission.
Exactly. And it requires this weird balance. For party intellectuals, it has to be conscious, so they can be precise in manipulating reality, telling deliberate lies while genuinely believing in them.
But it also has to be unconscious.
Yes, so they avoid feeling guilty or, feeling like it's all fake. It involves forgetting inconvenient facts, then pulling them back out of oblivion when needed, denying objective reality while still having to deal with it. It's a constant mental pretzel.
The example of black-white really drives it home.
Right. For an enemy, it means brazenly lying, saying black is white. But for a party member, it's first a loyal willingness to say that black is white when party discipline demands this.
Okay, following orders.
But then it goes deeper. It's also the ability to believe that black is white and more, to know that black is white and to forget that one has ever believed the contrary. Mind-bending stuff.
Truly. And that connects to the mutability of the past, right? This idea that history isn't fixed.
Precisely. It's a central tenet of INGSOC, the party's ideology. The past, they say, has no objective reality. It only exists in records and memories.
And since the party controls all the records,
And works constantly to control minds.
then the past is whatever the party chooses to make it. It's like a wiki page. Anyone with power can edit, and the old versions just vanish.
That's a good analogy. Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth is exactly that. He rectifies old news reports, speeches, even things like chocolate ration figures, to make sure the past always aligns perfectly with the present party line.
And it's done seamlessly.
Totally. All history was a palimpsest, scraped clean and reinscribed exactly as often as was necessary. And the terrifying part, in no case would it have been possible, once the deed was done, to prove that any falsification had taken place. It just becomes the new truth.
Which leads to that chilling slogan.
Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. It's the ultimate feedback loop of control.
And the third tool is Newspeak, Language itself as a weapon.
Yeah. The goal wasn't just to provide a way to express the party's worldview, but to make all other modes of thought impossible.
How did they even attempt that?
By shrinking the language, eliminating undesirable words, words associated with rebellion or old ideas, and stripping other words of any unorthodox secondary meanings.
Like simplifying grammar, too.
Yes, getting rid of irregularities, making adjectives by just adding elful, speedful instead of rapid, adverbs by adding all-wise, speed-wise instead of quickly. Very mechanical.
So complex concepts, nuanced ideas,
Yeah.
they just disappear.
Effectively, yes. Words like honor, justice, morality, democracy, science, they simply cease to exist in Newspeak. They were replaced by vague, blanket words.
Like crime-think.
Exactly. Crime-think covered everything related to liberty, equality, any kind of heresy. Old-think covered ideas like objectivity or rationalism. Orwell notes, greater precision would have been dangerous.
Because if you don't have the words,
You can't form the thoughts, at least not complex ones. Expressing unorthodox opinions above a very low level was well-nigh impossible, simply because the necessary words were not available.
wow. So, yeah, if your language is deliberately impoverished and history is constantly rewritten, how do you grasp reality? How do you even begin to question anything?
It's a profound question about how language shapes our entire reality. It's a total lockdown on the mind.
But even within this total system, Orwell shows resistance. Different kinds. Winston, for instance. His struggle feels very internal, very intellectual.
Absolutely. His rebellion is about trying to hold on to objective reality. That secret diary writing is a huge act of defiance for him. He clings to basic truths. Stones are hard, water is wet.
Trying to anchor himself.
Yeah, and he relies on what he calls ancestral memory. He remembers deep, complex feelings, like the love from his mother and sister, which he thinks belonged to the ancient time, a time of privacy, love, and friendship.
Emotions the party wants to erase.
Exactly. He feels those things are no longer possible. But he believes, deep down, if you can feel that staying human is worthwhile, even when it can't have any result whatever, you've beaten them. It's about inner integrity.
Then you have Julia. She's completely different, isn't she?
Totally different. The book calls her a rebel from the waist downwards. She has zero interest in party ideology, thinks it's all rubbish.
Her approach is much more pragmatic.
Very much so. She uses practical cunning. She plays the game on the surface, goes to rallies, joins the Junior Anti-Sex League, uses camouflage, but privately breaks the rules she actually cares about. Her motto is basically, if you kept the small rules, you could break the big ones.
She also has that interesting insight about sex, doesn't she?
Yeah, she gets the party strategy there. When you make love, you're using up energy. And afterwards, you feel happy and don't give a damn for anything. They can't bear you to feel like that.
So suppressing sexuality creates frustration.
Which, she figures, induced hysteria, which was desirable because it could be transformed into war fever and leader worship. It's a shrewd analysis of psychological manipulation.
But she doesn't care about the historical lies the way Winston does.
Not really. For her, it's always one bloody war after another, and one knows the news is all lies anyway. She can barely remember which country they were supposed to be at war with last month. The big picture stuff, the intellectual stuff, doesn't grab her. She's focused on navigating the system for personal satisfaction.
And the third group, the proles. Winston pins his hopes on them.
He does. If there was hope, it lay in the proles. He believes that out of those mighty loins, a race of conscious beings must one day come. It's almost a mystical faith.
And they do have more freedom, in a way.
In certain ways, yeah. They get rubbishy newspapers, trashy entertainment, those sentimental songs composed by machines. They can sing spontaneously. They have stronger family ties, it seems, and access to black market stuff, real tea, proper white bread, real sugar, things party members lack.
But intellectually.
That's the downside. Winston tries talking to an old prole about the past, but the man can only remember trivial details, a million useless things. The relevant facts were outside the range of their vision. Orwell compares them to ants, seeing small things but not large ones. They have freedom, maybe, but not necessarily the awareness to use it for revolution.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? Winston's intellectual resistance versus Julia's very practical, almost hedonistic rebellion. Which one offers more hope? Or is more likely to survive in that kind of world? It's tough to say.
Yeah, Orwell doesn't give an easy answer there.
Okay, moving towards the end game now. Let's look at the perpetual war, the party's true nature, and Oceania's future. Pynchon makes that point about prophecy versus prediction.
Right. He says it's not quite the same thing. And critiquing Orwell based on what he did and didn't get right is a bit of a game.
But Pynchon does list some things Orwell seemed to anticipate, looking back from 2003.
He does. Things like helicopters being used by law enforcement, the sheer ubiquity of TV, the two-way telescreen resembling interactive cable systems, or maybe even modern smart devices.
The idea that news is whatever the government says it is.
That's a big one. And widespread surveillance of ordinary people becoming mainstream for police. Pretty prescient on several fronts.
But what did Pynchon think Orwell missed?
Well, notably, the rise of religious wars involving various sorts of fundamentalism that's almost entirely absent in Oceania's purely secular tyranny.
Interesting. And also racial issues.
Yeah, Pynchon points out the lack of racial hostility, in particular anti-Semitism, despite that being so central to the fascism Orwell experienced firsthand. Goldstein is Jewish, but the hatred against him isn't really generalized into racism.
Why might that be?
Pynchon speculates Orwell might have thought old European nationalisms and perhaps their associated bigotries would just wither away by the time his imagined world formed. Pynchon calls that maybe an unwarrantedly chirpy analysis, given everything that's happened since 1945. Those hatreds proved pretty resilient.
A potential blind spot, then. Now, the war itself. O'Brien drops that bombshell on Winston.
The truth about the perpetual war, it's not really about conquest. It's waged by each ruling group against its own subjects.
To maintain control internally.
Exactly. The object of the war is not to make or prevent conquests of territory, but to keep the structure of society intact. War, in the old sense, has ceased to exist.
Because the superstates can't actually defeat each other.
Right. They not only cannot conquer one another, but would gain no advantage by doing so. In fact, the conflict props them all up. It serves two main purposes.
Okay, what were they?
First, to eat up the surplus of consumable goods. This prevents the general standard of living from rising, which could lead to leisure, critical thinking, and eventually rebellion. Keep people poor and scrambling.
And the second?
To maintain the right mental atmosphere. Constant fear, hatred, leader worship, feelings of triumph. All essential for party morale and social cohesion. War becomes a permanent psychological tool.
It's incredibly cynical. War purely for domestic control.
Utterly. And that leads us finally to O'Brien in the Ministry of Love, laying bare the party's philosophy.
Which isn't about punishment, he claims.
No, it's to cure you, to make you sane. As they define sanity, of course. We do not merely destroy our enemies, he says, we change them.
Which raises that terrifying question. What exactly are they curing you of? Independent thought, humanity itself.
Seems like it. O'Brien's definition of power is just bone-chilling. The individual only has power insofar as he ceases to be an individual. Power isn't about wealth or luxury. It's in inflicting pain and humiliation.
Tearing minds apart.
And putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. That's the goal. His vision for the future, a world of fear and treachery and torment, which will grow not less but more merciless as it refines itself. Progress means progress towards more pain.
All human connection, love, loyalty, gone, except towards the party.
There will be no love except the love of Big Brother. All other emotions are to be destroyed except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement.
And that final horrific image.
If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. It's just absolute despair. The ultimate vision of totalitarian control.
So we've journeyed through 1984. From Orwell's own experiences fueling the book, to the grim reality of Oceania, the mind-bending tools like doublethink and Newspeak, and the different ways people try to resist.
We've seen how the party aimed for total control, not just actions, but thoughts, memories, reality itself.
And their ultimate goal, as O'Brien makes clear, is to completely disconnect people from objective reality. To make truth simply whatever the party says it is.
We control matter because we control the mind, he claims. Reality is inside the skull.
So here's the thought to leave you with. If reality is just inside the skull and a powerful entity can reshape what's in there, what does that mean for your own understanding of existence? Especially when that entity's goal is to keep the heretic always screaming with pain, broken up, contemptible, and in the end, utterly penitent, saved from himself. What's left of the individual spirit then? And what responsibility do you have right now to protect your own internal truth?